Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, episode number 162.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Craig Boddington joins us today. Craig was born and raised in Kansas. He spent his youth in Boy Scout activities becoming an Eagle Scout. He attended the University of Kansas on an ROTC scholarship, graduating with an English degree and a regular commission in the Marine Corps. He continued to write while on active duty and in 1979 began as associate editor of Guns and Ammo, the editor and executive editor of Peterson's Hunting. His current position is executive field editor of Guns and Ammo, Peterson's Hunting, and Rifle Shooter. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a treat. And I know I got listeners all over North America. Mr. Craig Boddington. Craig is well known. He writes and associate editor for Guns and Ammo, Peterson's, Rifle Shooter, executive field editors. Craig's kind of sort of been there and done that, and so I'm just happy to have him on the show, and we're going to talk about hunting and whitetails and whatever else we have in mind. So, Craig, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Bruce. It's really good to be here. I appreciate the chance.
Let's just go back. We were in the warm-up. We're talking about a mutual friend we have up in British Columbia, Mike Hawkridge, and we're up on just an ungodly, scree slope, and he said, Bruce, DFTQ. And I go, what? So come on, you got to share that with the listeners, because Craig shared that with Mike on a hunt he had been up there with, and so Mike was trying to motivate me to get up this mountain. So, Craig, what is that all about?
Well, Bruce, I wish that was a Marine Corps saying, but it's not. When I had a very strange task force in the Persian Gulf, and worked a lot with the Army, and they didn't work for me, but there was an Army battalion there where we were, and that's their motto, DFTQ. Like Marines say Semper Fi, and the guys in the Army say Who Up, and many units have their own special motto. And this battalion's motto was DFTQ, and it means die first, then quit. Well,
and we did get up the hill, and we had a great hunt, but I'll always remember that, because Mike and I, in our conversations to this day, we always kind of sign off with that. So, hey, thanks for that little help there. Let's talk about hunting whitetails, and on your bio, you included a picture of a very nice whitetail. Was that in Mexico? Was that in Texas? Or
that's a really nice, actually, that's a management deer, but it's a place I go occasionally in Texas, and that was my first ever drop point buck, and he was a management buck because he was mismanaged on one side, but just a nice old buck. I wish I could have sent you one from my place in Kansas, but first year since I've had the place, I didn't get a deer there this past season.
Well, it works for me, and folks, when you listen to the episode coming up here in a couple of weeks, you'll see a nice drop tine. And Craig, in the warm-up, we talked about the experience versus inches of bone, or however you want to say it. In our industry, and I think you agree with me, we're getting so wound up in the inches that we're missing the experience. So let's camp out on that right now and just expound on that, please.
Well, you see it all over the place. You really see it with all species, but I think, for one thing, I do believe in the record books, because they show you where the big ones come from, and they show you how big animals get, and it's valuable to know that. But I think we're getting a little bit too fixated on so many inches of score, or so many inches of antler, or so many points, and it really doesn't matter what you're hunting. What's really important is to be out there and enjoy the experience. And if you're a seasoned hunter, then you may be looking for just an animal for the freezer, and then it doesn't much matter, and or you might be looking for an older, mature animal, because that's really always the greatest challenge, is to get a grown-up deer. But exactly what it's carrying on its head is shouldn't be, to me, the most important thing. On my place in Kansas, I've only shot one really good buck. Usually I try to get something that nobody else is likely to want. And usually that works out pretty well. But, it's really all about the hunt. It's about the experience. And there's certainly nothing wrong with looking for the biggest animal in the woods, but I think it's important to not get fixated on it. It really doesn't matter where I am in the world. I don't carry a tape measure. If it's an older, mature animal, then that's good, and some of them are going to be big, and some of them are not going to be big.
What's it like to be, you look past your history, what's it like to be in different places, not in North America, but just in places in the country, and you're sitting around after the hunt in the campfire? Is that any different than what you've experienced with your buddies down on your farm in Kansas?
No, it really isn't. I mean, in many ways, hunting is the same the world over, and it's certainly the same level of experience. I mean, people always ask me what's my favorite hunt, and the only answer to that is somewhere between the last one and the next one. I'm a junkie for all of it. Obviously, some hunts are more difficult than others, and more challenging, and some are just plain miserable. But it's really, in many ways, it's all the same excitement. And I've been so fortunate to have been able to hunt in a lot of different places, and that's really been part of my occupation. I go places and I write about it, and I do a little television. But I think it's important to say that I fully understand that doesn't make me a better hunter than the good old American whitetail hunter. And quite honestly, we're fortunate. The whitetail deer is the most numerous game animal on Earth, and it's created the largest hunting society on Earth. But there's nothing more difficult in the world than a whitetail deer. And anybody, especially if we're talking east of the Mississippi, anybody who has any degree of consistent success on whitetails in the east is probably in the top percentile of the best hunters in the entire world. Nothing's more difficult.
So let's just echo that. And the guy who hunts the same 40, and I've been fortunate to hunt whitetails for 50 years now, but when you look at a 40 and it's yours or it's your friends, and you hunt that and hunt it year in, year out, and some years are good, some years are better. If you put, consistently see the deer and make the choice, take or not, harvest or not, put them on the ground or not, you're experiencing something that is really grand. And I just want to listen to hear that. It's really a special thing to be a whitetail hunter and to challenge probably the most elusive game animal that I know. Would you echo that?
Oh, I really would. I mean, that's just a classic experience. Now, obviously, there in any hunt there is a home court advantage. I mean, the guy that's hunting his back 40, and I've got a little ground in Kansas, and I certainly know it better than anybody, and I have a pretty good idea where to go based on conditions. And when I have guests, I mean, we do try to put them in the right place based on that knowledge. But when you go somewhere else in the world, that it's a whole new ball game, and really everywhere else in the world might be the next county over in a patch of public land you've never hunted before, even a friend's piece of private ground. When you go into new country, then the game changes. And a lot of the places I go, you're pretty much required by law to have guides, and some folks that are fortunate enough to have really great hunting close to home and stay close to home, look down on that. But you know what? That's a long-standing tradition. Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone, and Theodore Roosevelt all hired local guides, and we think of the greatest African hunter in the world as being Frederick Courtney Salut, killed by a German sniper in January 1917 when he was 65, for heaven's sakes. He should have been home by the fire. But he actually hunted widely throughout North America. A lot of people don't know that. But when Fred Salut went someplace, he hired a local guide. So there's really nothing wrong with that, but there is a real special experience to being able to do it by yourself, on your own, figure out the animals, get the shot, and recover the game yourself. There's really nothing like it.
Now, I'm going to open a can of worms in selection of caliber for whitetails. That's a great question for you because you write about this all the time, and I don't, I'm opening a can of worms. I'm guilty, but, is it the Marlin 336, 30-30, or is it the venerable 30-06? Weigh in on that, will you?
Well, that's funny, and yeah, you're right. I am totally a double dipper. I write about hunting, but I also write about guns, and I'm fascinated by firearms, especially rifles. But that really gives me the chance to double my workload, which is maybe not a good thing always. But our place in Kansas, now everybody thinks of Kansas as being wide open fields and meandering river bottoms. Well, that's not our area. We're heavy oak ridges. We're thick timber country, not much different from the Ozarks and really much of the east. And I've got one stand, a primary food plot, where theoretically you could get a 300-yard shot, but I think we've got, I think we're up to like 26 different stands, and that is the only stand we have where you're really likely to get a shot over 100 yards. But the folks that we've had come join us, friends and customers and whatever, I have yet to have a single one bring a 30-30. I have yet to have a single one bring a rifle that wasn't scoped. A lot of them bring 7 magnums. A lot of them bring 300 magnums. 270 is, of course, very popular. But as I say, we've only got one spot on the whole place where you couldn't do just fine with a good old open-sighted 30-30, whether a Marlin or a Winchester. So it is kind of funny. For me, the best of the best would be a scope 270 or perhaps a scope 308 or perhaps a scope 30-06 because they could handle anything. There are advantages to having a scope sight, and we do have that one place where you may have to reach a little bit. But what it really comes down to is whatever makes you the most confident.
So listeners, just remember the last, words, whatever makes you the most confident, and carry that weapon, whatever caliber it is, it really doesn't matter. If you have confidence in that gun, then that's what you should hunt with.
Well, absolutely. And since I write about guns, I'm not able to stick with one. I get test guns in and I play with them, and sometimes I hunt with them, and most of the time I send them back because the gun safe's pretty full. But once in a while I fall in love and have to send a check instead of sending the gun back. But really, if you get really familiar with one rifle, or if you hunt a wide variety game, maybe possibly 2 or 3, but if you get really familiar with just 1 or 2 good choices that have a degree of versatility, you're going to do a lot better than the guys like me that try to figure out the perfect gun for the perfect purpose and then wind up out in the woods with a rifle that you've spent very little time on the range with.
Let's change it up a little bit, and we're going to talk, listeners, a little sensitive area, free range and high fence, whitetail hunting or quote unquote big game hunting. Craig, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think to some degree this is part of what has given us the record book fever that isn't all pervasive, but it's certainly out there, and I don't have a problem with game ranching at all, because it's certainly in many other parts of the world it's reaped tremendous benefits for wildlife, but I think it's important to understand the difference, and because of selective breeding and protein feeding and some other things that you can do on an intensely managed place, hey, the deer are going to get bigger. And on that particular place, that's the real world. But where most of us hunt, that is not the real world. In so much of the country, there's a relatively small percentage of bucks that actually make it to full maturity, and of course, the genetics and the feed and the minerals vary tremendously from place to place. So, I think what's important is to look for a nice, respectable, mature animal for the place that you're hunting. And obviously, deer in Florida are quite different than deer in Montana or Saskatchewan, and every area has kind of the norm. And if you're looking for a really good buck, then the buck you ought to be looking for is a deer that's maybe a little bit better than the norm wherever you're hunting. But we see too many pictures, both in the magazines and on television, of these really big deer that have been artificially raised behind wire. And again, I don't have a real problem with it. I don't do it. There are other parts of the world where an awful lot of hunting is on fenced estates for different reasons. New Zealand, South Africa, increasingly in Europe. Pretty hard to completely stay out of fences there, because they're there for management reasons and political reasons and sociological reasons. But I can honestly say that I've never shot a whitetail deer behind wire. Have no problems with anybody who does. It's, that's a personal choice. But I think it's important to understand that the kind of deer that you could look for, whether it's public land or private, that are totally free range and totally wild, are going to be a little bit different than some of the stuff we see out there.
Thanks for sharing that. And listeners, yeah, it's about, what you want to do with your money, with your time. And, that's why we live, in North America, we have those opportunities.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's totally free choice, and I'm certainly not knocking it in any way, but I think that the Pennsylvania hunter who is so fortunate to get let's say a 5-year-old 8-pointer with some antler mass, hey, he ought to be really, really proud of that, and not worry too much about the 190s and 200s that are coming from more artificial situations.
Yeah, and Brenda Valentine, early on in the show, I had her as a guest, and she said, Bruce, it's your hunt. Whatever your goal is or you're happy with, then just be happy with it and celebrate, that harvest, that kill.
Well, absolutely, and it's, it is a free country, and we certainly can all hunt for different reasons, and there's lots of different reasons, but the main thing is to enjoy what you're doing and really kind of try to understand why you're out there, which theoretically is to have a good time and maybe put some venison in the freezer.
Well, Craig, that was a great segue into the next topic we're going to talk about, and it's the fastest growing segment in the outdoor industry. Not just the shooting sports or the hunting, but the outdoor industry are women today. So weigh in on that, and let's share some of your thoughts.
Well, I think it's fantastic. You know, you and I are probably pretty close to the same age, Bruce, and when we started, there have always been female hunters, but they were pretty rare birds 50 years ago. Didn't see that an awful lot. Well, today they're making up an increasing percentage of the hunting public, and I think most of us crusty old guys have welcomed them, but I think there's still a few out there who do not. And you know, we know that on the social media, we know that if a woman takes a really nice trophy, especially if it's an animal that's slightly controversial, she's going to get attacked viciously. But what really bothers me is a lot of the guys attack them too. A lot of male hunters also attack them, and I simply don't understand that. We had an interesting experience this fall. Our hunting season turned really, really warm the second week. And usually we get some secondary rut, but I guarantee it didn't happen this year. It was really tough sledding. So last weekend of our season, my daughter came down from college, and hey, she shot deer before, but she really wanted to get a buck, and she wanted to take it back to college to share with her roommates. And so we weren't even looking for a big deer, but it was really tough. And of course, the next week was finals week, so I've got a couple of box blinds, and so she was doing some studying while we're sitting in the blind. And man, you wouldn't believe the hunters that came out of the woodwork attacking that, saying, "Yeah, you don't know how to raise your children, and how many deer are you letting walk by, and what's wrong with you to allow that?" Well, you know, we're kind of multitasking because the study needed to get done, and the season was ticking away fast. But the final evening of the season, and we were only 10 minutes from into shooting light. We passed some young deer, and a genuine management buck that I'd kind of been hoping would show up came in, and we were down to 10 minutes before the season was over. And so I just kind of pointed my finger. She'd already seen the deer, but didn't know if she was supposed to do anything about it or not. And so I just motioned with my finger, and she shot the deer perfectly. And, you know, it wasn't a big buck. And in fact, it was not a big buck at all, but she was just absolutely delighted and did a wonderful job. Now, she's 20. She started hunting when she was 16. My older daughter, Brittany, has done a lot of hunting, but she also didn't start until she was about 16. So it seems to me like some of the ladies come to it a little bit later. My wife Donna was in her 40s before she ever hunted. But that's the same with guys. I mean, at every show, I run into people who actually started hunting late in life and love it as much as we do. But with women, the difference is that many never had the opportunity. They simply weren't exposed to it because it kind of wasn't a girl thing to do. And that's changing. I know a lot more guys are taking their daughters out, and a lot more guys are taking their wives and girlfriends out and getting them involved. And hey, most people take to it. Some people are just not going to be interested, and others will. But it's not a sex thing at all. But I just think it's fantastic that we have so many women that are getting involved in the sport. And I tell you what, we need them, because guys like you and me, Bruce, we're getting older, and we as hunters we're holding our numbers, and in fact we've increased, but we're still shrinking as a percentage of the population.
Yes, we are. And I just, as I told you in the warm-up, I just had my hip replaced, so it's painful as ever to age. I'm trying to do it gracefully, Craig. I really am.
Well, my hips are fine, but the knees are going fast.
Oh, geez. Hey, we've got 4 or 5 minutes left, and I'd like to do a couple things. Talk about, Kansas and whitetail and what you're doing on your property there, and then give some shout-outs to people along the way that have made a difference in your life. That would be great, and then we'll wrap the show. So let's head out to Kansas, and let's talk about your farm there and what you got going on.
Well, really, we just have fun there. It's tough hunting. It's heavy timber. We've got a couple of food plots that have really done well for us in kind of localizing the deer a little bit. But my place, and really my neighbor's place too, mostly bedding cover, and so we put stands on the trails and whatnot, and we really have fun with it. Now, I am from Kansas. That's my native state, but this is not a family farm. When I grew up, we didn't even have a deer season, so obviously I give the majority of the credit to getting me involved in this to my dad. He was a wonderful dad, and when I was a teenager, we started doing a little hunting in Colorado and Wyoming. But the reason for that was simply because there wasn't a deer season in Kansas. So we didn't grow up with it, and my dad probably never shot a centerfire rifle until he was well into his 40s. In so many parts of the world, deer hunting is a part of the culture, but that wasn't the way in Kansas. We were bird hunters. We had fantastic pheasant hunting. We had awesome quail hunting, but we hardly even knew anybody who owned a centerfire rifle because there was just absolutely no reason for it there. So things have changed, but both my dad and my grandfather were avid bird hunters, and so I'm sure that's where I caught the bug.
Thanks for that. And Craig, we're at the time of the show to give shout-outs to whomever. I know the list is long, but just a couple of people or the people you work at Peterson's, whatever you want. So you got about a minute and a half here to just shout out. So sorry to do that to you, but go ahead.
Well, that's a tough and very long list, but I got off active duty of the Marines back in 79, and so I credit a really great scoutmaster and a lot of good leaders in the Marines for giving me some kind of work ethic and teaching me how to get along with a lot of different people. But in 79, I was doing a lot of freelance writing, and had never really considered going to work for a magazine. I have an English degree, but I never took any journalism courses, didn't have any idea what an editor actually did. But Robert E. Peterson, Pete Peterson of Peterson Publishing, took a chance on me and gave me a job, and it worked out. A couple of years later, I was the editor of Hunting Magazine and stayed there for about 14 years before I escaped the office. So, if any turning event in my life could be traced, it would be to that one event when Pete Peterson gave me an opportunity, really at a very young age, and of course that was 38 years ago.
Wow. Well, thanks for that, and Craig, thanks for your service. So many times we don't just say that, and doesn't matter the rank you held. You served our country well and admirably, and so thank you for that.
Oh, I had a good run. Wouldn't have missed it for the world.
And with that, we're going to close another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. Craig Boddington, thanks for being such a great guest, and can't wait till the next time, and the first beer's on me.
All right, sounds good. Hey, appreciate very much being there, and have fun out in the woods. Get that hip fixed.
Yes, sir.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient.
If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.